The Prime Minister Tony Abbott has announced Australian Special Forces are moving into Iraq to advise the country's military in its fight against Islamic State militants. The announcement comes after US President Barack Obama indicated he'd like members of the coalition fighting IS, including Australia, to step up their contribution. The President's comments came after talks with Prime Minister Tony Abbott and just days after the US committed 1,500 more military advisers. Our Chief Political Reporter Kieran Gilbert has more from Beijing.
Traditional photograph, the leaders dressed in traditional Chinese suits, and in that group photograph, Prime Minister Abbott right behind Vladimir Putin, looking over his shoulder. The first time the two men had been in the same room since the MH17 atrocity. Not really the opportunity there to raise his concerns, the Prime Minister. That will come later in the day when the two men sit down for a formal bilateral meeting. Yesterday, President Obama made it pretty clear that he'd like Australia and other coalition allies fighting ISIL to do more, just as the US has announced it is sending 1,500 more military advisers to take on ISIL in Iraq and northern Syria. This is a little of what the President had to say after those talks here in Beijing.
We're moving to a slightly different phase now. But as we are setting that up, I am having conversations with Australia and other coalition partners that are already committed to putting trainers in to see how they can supplement and work with us in this overall effort.
The Prime Minister confirmed in his meeting to the President that the SAS, the Special Forces and Commandos, are now heading into Iraq, that operation has begun, the legal framework's been set and the logistics have been overcome and the operation is now underway. As to the prospect of more troops being sent, the Prime Minister was non-committal on that. So after the elaborate welcome last night at the National Aquatic Centre, the Water Cube, today it is the full day of talks. The leaders will sit down for the APEC summit. After that, the Prime Minister heads off to Burma for the East Asia summit, and then of course back to Brisbane and the big G20, which is at the end of the week. Kieran Gilbert, Sky News, Beijing.
Australia is expected to sign a free trade deal with China by the end of the G20 summit in Brisbane. Prime Minister Tony Abbott has already met with the Chinese Premier in Beijing on the sidelines of the APEC summit. The PM says he's confident the agreement will be signed within the next week.
I'm very confident that we can do this. There's just one or two I's to be dotted and T's to be crossed. I don't want to dwell on them. I just want to say that it is very much in both our countries' interests that we get this done, because trade means jobs. Trade means jobs. It means better quality products for Chinese consumers. It means more opportunities for Australian exporters. Trade means jobs. Trade is good for everyone.
China's main push is to have more access to invest in Australia, which the opposition believes could mean cheap Chinese labour, despite the government ruling that out.